Good afternoon and welcome to the special council meeting of Thursday, January 15th, 2026 at 1 p.m. We'll call the meeting to order. Just to reiterate the PSA that's starting to circulate on social media and etc. So the public portion of the public special budget meeting that was originally scheduled for this evening has been postponed a week till next Thursday, January 22nd at 5 p.m. in the council chambers. Again, just due to the weather, we don't want people jeopardizing their safety to come and attend, and we were trying to get as many people to attend as possible. So you'll see more about that, and it will be continued to be disseminated through the signage and through the social media accounts of the municipality. So with that, we'll begin the meeting with the land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that the township of Cabot is located on the Treaty 20 Mississauga territory in the traditional territory of the Mississauga Anishinaabe. We offer our gratitude to First Nations for their care for and teachings about these lands. May we honor these teachings. I'll look to council for approval of today's agenda. Moved by Councilor Burns, second by Deputy Mayor Huntley. All in favor? That is approved. Any disclosures of pecuniary interests? Seeing none. There is no closed session, so we'll go right into the presentations, beginning with the Cabot Public Library Board budget. Carla Bookborough. Carla, welcome.
Good afternoon. It was a bit of a trek to get here with that snow. I'm going to keep this presentation very brief. There's been very little change in the library budget since when I was here on December 11th. Our operating remains the same request from the levy, $347,252. Our levy request for capital comes out to $37,050, but we are asking $21,545 from the development charges for a net levy request of $362,757. These are the same numbers that will be mirrored in Ms. Pope's presentation. The main change, the only real difference in our budget from the first submission in December to today's is we have underspent our book purchasing funds. Just materials haven't come in. We were underspent by about $1,000. And so we were rolling that over and thereby reducing the levy request by the same $1,000. I've stated there the operating budget total for the library is $376,796. This was the numbers discussed at our board meeting on December 16th. $347,252 comes from the levy. The remaining $28,000 comes from the public library operating grant, as well as our self-generated funds, and $800 from development charges. The circulating materials, $31,250 is what we're hoping to spend, $9,505 from the levy, the $1,000 rollover, and $19,945 from development charges. And IT investment is at $6,000, which would come from the levy. On page 2, there's a summary of where we are, 2025 approved budget, the 2025 year to date. Those are the only numbers that are different than what I presented to my board because they are actuals up to December 29th, and then the 2026 proposed budget. No changes on this operating budget from what I had given back in December. And page 3 shows the actual spendings in the different categories for circulating materials, the IT investment, as well as the bottom chart is the monies that we have used from our donation reserves that we have been collecting over the last few years. They were itemized in the auditor's report at about $13,000 at the end of 2024. So we have spent about $7,000 this year. And I'm working with my staff and the board to come up with ways on spending the remainder of the money. The councillors should have also received for your hard copies a more itemized version of our operating budget that just goes out line by line so that you can see what that is, as opposed to just a summary. I'm not sure if you have any questions for me, if I need to provide any more detail.
Thanks, Carla. Questions, member of council. Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair, just for my clarity, you were saying that you underspent and the stuff hadn't come in. So did you order books that didn't arrive, or you just haven't had a need to order that many?
A little bit of both. We had pre-ordered about $2,000 worth of material, and we had about $3,000 to spend. So there was a little bit of an underspending on material that wasn't ordered. The pre-orders will be coming in over the next 6 months or so. Some of them are pre-release titles that we order. It helps the company that we order through know how many titles they have to get from the different publishing companies.
Deputy Mayor.
Through you, Chair. We always seem to be playing catch up with the IT equipment. Like how is that program going now?
So the board, through you, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, the board had been working with the county ID department. Christopher Lee had produced a list of things that he thought we needed as deficits to catch up on before we could look at the county taking over and helping manage our IT. Some of those things, a lot of those have been addressed from his report, things like new LAN cabling, relocating switches around the building so that they weren't as visible, getting a box to lock some of those materials in. The majority of the deficits were outlined at the Millbrook branch, mainly because of the difference in physical structure. So a lot of that was accomplished, and it was through the funds that we had in 2024, 2025. I have spent $10,735 this year out of the $12,000 that I did have available. So there's a little bit left over. I thought I would get closer to the full 12,000 spend. We bought 6 brand new computers for the public to use. We upgraded all the computers that were running Windows 11 Home to Windows 11 Pro. We have also installed new cybersecurity software that matches what the township uses that was recommended by the county. So we are on track to do what has been asked for in the county IT report. And now it's just more of a maintenance thing. The 6,000 that I asked for this year will be to buy 4 new computers for our circulation terminals. The original ones were bought in 2019, so it's been a few years since we've had them. They are a lower use machine, and so we will be falling those laptops out to the public to be able to borrow and use within the library, so that we've gone down to having only 6 workstations for the public to use, 4 in Millbrook, 2 at the Bruce Johnston branch. And we're finding at times that may not be quite enough. And so we'll have these laptops available that the public can come into the library and use.
Yeah, and just to build on what Carla was saying, the county, the IT review that Christopher did at the time identified like literally almost 100,000 in potential expenses to get like a reinvigorated, let's say, a holistic IT perspective at both branches of the library. So, you know, some of those things we were able to accomplish without incurring the exponential costs and figuring out workarounds. So this is sort of like a placeholder for renewing the holistic IT components of both branches over time. So there will be a time where probably start to fluctuate a bit more now that we're starting to renew hardware, but the idea is to have that placeholder to sort of be constantly keeping up gaps. And obviously with the changes with regards to our IT moving forward, there might be additional costs that might be identified there as well, that we're just trying to not have zero established for moving forward. But thanks for that, Carla. That was a good explanation. Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Carla. We just need a motion to receive the presentation. Moved by Councilor Burns, seconded by Councilor Edgerton. All in favor? That is approved. Thanks again. The next, Ms. Pope, Director of Finance, second draft 2026 budget. Over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to all of council, this is our second draft budget presentation. As the mayor has indicated, the 5 p.m. meeting is postponed until next Thursday evening. This slide deck presentation includes the educational slides that we have reviewed at the first draft meeting, and we were going to again review in detail at the public meeting. So I'll hold the detailed comments for those educational slides for the detailed meeting next Thursday night, but I will touch on them as we hit those pages, but we might move a bit quicker here at this moment. So as an overview, our second draft for the 2026 operating and capital budget does incorporate the discussions we had at our meeting on December the 11th. The changes within the budget have reduced the proposed municipal income tax rate to 4.82% at this time. It does include expenditures up to November 30th. There's one aspect in some of the actuals I'll speak to in a few moments under Parks and Rec, where I'll state where we had a few changes that aren't quite incorporated, but we'll have them in for the next report. And we are still including a surplus for 2025, currently still estimated at 250,000. The reason why I can't yet determine is because all those invoices are still coming in for December. And until I know what we've actually spent, I can't really let you know what surplus I can bring forward. And 1% municipal residential tax rate increase does equal approximately 124,000 in revenue towards the operating and the capital expenses. So the fiscal overview or summary is similar to the last time when we met. There's a strong collaboration between council and staff, both past and present, working together to make sure that we can streamline our budget, improve operational efficiencies, and do the very best that we can as stewards of the municipal taxpayer. Our mission statement does capture this reason that the County of Catamount is committed to delivering responsive and cost-effective services that provide for economic, social, and environmental well-being of our ratepayers now and into the future. Our corporate strategic plan contains our vision that we are a strong, sustainable rural community. We celebrate, protect, and promote our unique history, natural heritage, and value the contribution and interests of all ratepayers in building a prosperous future. Budget basics. This is one of our educational slides, but basically we have an operating budget and we have a capital budget. And as a municipality, according to the Municipal Act, we must maintain a balanced operating budget, and we are unable to run a deficit on our operating expenditures. We are only permitted to borrow funds on capital, and we do receive our annual ARL that we report anytime we're discussing those matters. Our process starts usually for us every June when the council of the day reviews our budget summary timetable to determine the dates and when we're going to meet. We send out the information in August and September. We receive back the information from departments, and internally the budget committee works together with management and staff to refine those details. What's new this year is that because we have an asset management technician, we've been able to have more eyes on one specific area, which is our assets, and we're able to pull out the data from Public Sector Digest and put it back in. And that's been integral in maintaining what we have for asset management and our asset management plan. But not just that, we're actually now pulling out and putting back into and refining. So it's not a document that you've approved that's sitting on a shelf. It's a document that you've approved that we are working on, we are using, we are collaborating, using that data, we're refining it, and whatever decisions you make in this budget will be fed back through that, and it's a constant circle. We are hoping to be able to use the budget module that we have purchased and not yet been trained on. That should be next year. So this is good news. We've been working really hard to get towards this with all the staff even before we hired our asset management person, but this goes back to 2009 when the first asset management was discussed and passed by council. So that's wonderful. The property tax assessment system, we know we're still using 2016 values. It comes from MPAC, waiting on the province to let us know. We are aware of that. And just to reiterate, when a property is assessed in our local community, even though they might purchase it at $1.2 million, it is not added at a value, a CVA value to the roll at that same value. It's always discounted back to 2016 to ensure that everybody is painted and treated fairly. So your assessed property is multiplied by your municipal tax rate. Inside the municipal tax rate, we collect for education and county and the local municipality, and then we remit the county levies, and we remit all the school board levies back to them and only retain the municipal portion to operate the municipality. That's basically what this next slide says with the upper tier and lower tier. And then the wastewater budget is a standalone budget. It must balance itself. We do the 5-year water wastewater financial plan, which you've just reviewed again this past fall. And those rates are set according to that. Water wastewater doesn't have an actual annual budget. We're adhering to the rates that have been set for the 5 years, and that's how we work. And then we just temper it back with growth. This is just another education slide, but MPAC assessed property values in Ontario. are set by the province. The next assessment, we don't know when it is. We're using 2016. And so what it basically means for property owners is if on the roll last year, your property value was 400,000, then this year on the roll, your property value is 400,000 unless you've made a change to your property. You've built or done something where MPAC has been on site and there's been an assessment change. Phase in cycle. So historically, this used to be over 4 years. This is how it worked before. So the 2012 values had been updated that time and got to that 2016 rate. And what they used to do is over a 4-year period, they would just equally add that quarter every single year to finally get you there over 4 years. If there was ever a reduction, it happened in year 1. We're not dealing with that yet. We're just waiting on the province. The OMPF, we have received notice that we are receiving $633,200 in funding through the OMPF. The OMPF is always applied across the board in the operating budget. It is not applied to capital, and it reduces the ask that we need from the municipal tax rate on the municipal tax rate according to the budget. It's been many years, and sometimes talking about the OLG seems like we're repeating ourselves, but we've had so many successes in the past. I just like to bring them forward when we ever have the opportunity. I remember the reports back in 2012 with council and deliberating, and we didn't know back then that the OLG slots would be leaving, and we had no idea. And so we've had successes along the way. $1.4 million was removed from the operating budget in 2013, and we haven't relied on those funds at all for the operating budget since then. We've been able to maintain $1.1 million or more in the capital budget. And then we haven't received a contribution from the OLG towards capital since 2015. And every year we always prioritize our assets. And as a benchmark, we use the depreciation value from the previous financial statements to ensure that we're putting aside those funds. And you see that every year in the capital. And that has been coming through the municipal tax rate since 2016. And so again, no OLG funds there. The only OLG funds are still the funds to pay off the $2.4 million for the excess project that we were aware of that council gave permission to do so. And we continue to pay down that loan. At the time of my last report, there was information where slot operations were going to cease as of March 2026. Since that report to now, the OLG has reversed their earlier plan, and therefore they're in negotiations again. But this slide is just to give you an idea that because they had originally said they were going to close or cease operations in March of 2026 and would provide the municipality with another year of funding to 2027 of March. This is the schedule that if that were to happen, March 31st, 2027, there would be $367,104 unfunded of that original $2.4 million. If COVID hadn't happened and facilities were left open, we would be done, but it wasn't. So that's the only piece that potentially could affect us because we don't use the OLG funds for any other purpose. So that's just a reminder. And this is an information slide on reserve and reserve funds. So we've seen that a lot. So we'll skip over that. And the next page, please. And the next place, please. The annual repayment limit. This is what I was speaking of. We receive this annually. Basically, you can only spend 25% of your net revenues on debenture payments. That's basically what this slide says. And so this is the amount that we continue to report anytime we're talking about debt so that you know where we're at. So the budget committee started with initial submissions from departments. We worked together and there had been changes and refinements to bring us down to about 10.28% as of the December 11th, but that wasn't in any way proposing that rate, just that we were looking to council to help us with prioritizing projects. The updated second draft includes the changes that were discussed that are included in the report, and therefore that's why we're down to 4.82%. 1% municipal tax levy would mean that the residential tax bill, if it was $100,000, would be $7.76 next year, or for the 2026 year. Of course, we know that homes aren't assessed at $100,000, so a more realistic example would be a 1% tax increase on a home that was assessed by MPAC at $400,000 would approximately cause their taxes to go up by $31.04. This next slide, the tax levy comparison, I've included the growth in the assessment, the weighted assessment. So our community, we have grown approximately 2.4%. And this particular budget is $12.9 million to be raised through the tax rate. Next slide. This is the same as presented before, but the consumer price index rose 1.9%. We have the wage increases in the union agreements. The construction price index, we did get updated information that has risen 4.2% year over year. And therefore the development charges will be indexed by 4.2%. And December 1st, council did approve the user fees and charges bylaw. And any funds that we receive through user fees obviously bring in revenues to the municipality and reduce the direct impact on the municipal property tax rate. The next slide is the schedule, which is also provided as an attachment in the report, just outlining the roll total, showing the amount of taxes, tax valuations, all the different tax rates that we have, and then being able to then raise the $12.9 million of funding required to balance the budget. The next slide is putting everything together. This is a budget summary with all departments, just as a consolidated report, giving you similar information about the funding, where we're spending it and operating in capital, and then where we're pulling it from in order to fund all the projects. Next slide. The operating budget. So we're just going to go through departmentally about the operating budget. Overall, the consolidated department increase is about 5.7%, and you can see it in more detail in the next couple of slides. And the same adjustments applied across all departments are the same adjustments that were there for first draft as well. So you'll see that 5.7 is the first total at the center of the graph on the right-hand side. And it's showing the variance. Sometimes the percentage looks high, but it's because the budget for that particular area is really low. So that's why we provide you both the dollar value and the percentage value just for information purposes and for our discussions today. Next slide. We've added a few slides just to give you an overview or a highlight of a few of our larger departments, so you can see what happens in those departments. As a reminder, we're talking about the budget. So this is providing you with budget information. This isn't meant to represent actuals for the year. This is the budget and how we foresee it. So basically in protective services, the largest component there is payroll and benefits. Then the second component at 32% is operating expenses, and then vehicle expenses approximately 4%. And if you look to the left, the way that that's funded, 91% is funded through the municipal tax levy, and then the other 9% is coming through some of those user fees that we're able to reduce the impact on the taxpayer, so they don't have to pay that portion that are coming through separately through revenues. So a similar type slide for the Public Works Department, and I have verified the revenues they're a different value, but the percentage happens to work out the same. So it's not a mistake. I went back myself to make sure I didn't make a mistake. So same idea here, Public Works expenditures at $3.2 million, primarily the largest area, but it's pretty close with operating, but 47% is payroll and benefits, 43% is operating, 10% is coming expenses for vehicles. And then overall, the funding formula, 9% approximately through their user fees and 91% through the municipal tax levy. Parks and facilities. So obviously here, our revenues, we're charging to use the facilities, things like that, different rentals. So that changes the revenues coming in there for parks and facilities. 28% is coming from the public through other areas, and 72% of the cost of the Parks and Facilities Department is coming through the municipal tax levy. On the right, you'll see the breakdown of the expenditures of $1.8 million, with the largest portion being payroll and benefits at 57%, second being the operating expenses at 41%, and 2% vehicle. And then police services, this is external to us because we contract this with the city of Peterborough. So 99% is the actual police contract itself, and then their insurance premiums are about 1%. And we have a small it's called OCTF, and I'm just blanking for a minute, a prisoner transfer payment agreement where we get a small amount of funding. And so that's why you see that small 1%. We do get that recapped from them and sent, but it's not until the end of the year and then it's reconciled. So anyhow, primarily the revenues do come from the tax rate, but we do get a small little amount that can offset that. The environmental tax rate is separate. It will increase by about 1.2%, which is 32 cents for every 100,000 of property assessment. And then water, wastewater, again, this is just a statement to say that it follows the financial plan and the rate study, and it does not affect property taxes. Capital budget overview, long-term financial plan. We're following the asset management plan and our corporate strategic plan. If we just go to the next slide, it's the summary of where we're at now with the changes from between the two different budget dates. So we're looking at $11.8 million of capital expenditures after rollovers, which net capital expenditures that we're looking for funding for that we don't currently have funding for in reserves or what have you in reserves or revenues or grant applications that are in process is $4.1 million. Last year, it was $3.9 million. And the breakdown of that $4.1 million, most of that is the asset replacement reserve at the $3.2 million. And the rest of it is the $905,743 funded through the municipal tax levy. So that's a bit of a summary overview. The next page here, we have the first section of the capital requests, and we can talk in more detail. I'll just quickly summarize and go through this. So that includes, like I said, the changes from the last time. We'll go to the next page. Under parks and facilities here's an area I'd like to just highlight for you. We had the discussion about Maple Leaf Park playground equipment at $50,000 to be funded through the Parkland General Fund, which was included and updated here. However, because we're not actually doing works yet, and this was to set aside funds so that we could apply for grants, it was intended that would have been moved down. So for final and next draft, you'll see that particular piece moved down. So that will be corrected in the next one. That's really the only change that didn't get incorporated in here, and we'll make sure it's in there. But there's no effect on the municipal tax rate because we're funding that through the Parkland General. And then the next page is the roads and environmental services. These grants under the federal infrastructure programs, these are the ones that have been approved. We talked about them at the last meeting, so we can move through those. And then pending or unknown, we have these two listed here as well. Same, we talked about them at the first draft, and I hope to have an update for you at the final with some changes that are coming through behind the scenes. Water, wastewater, capital requests have been updated as well, and the detailed is attached to the report as well as this summary here included. And you'll see at the bottom there that $1.6 million we're looking to pull. Again, we're pulling from the water wastewater reserves, and the way the water wastewater reserves are funded is by taking the 5-year water wastewater study rates, charging the appropriate rates, paying out the proper expenditures, and transferring the correct amounts back into the reserve to fund year after year after year. So that's a normal process. This does not affect the property tax rate. Council did approve a 5-year capital program for water main and road infrastructure. It was a report that was brought forward in the fall. And so we just wanted to highlight here that Council did approve an accelerated $8.6 million 5-year program to replace the aging water mains and restore roads in Millbrook, as outlined in both our asset management plan and the Public Works Report 2025-6. And just as a quick summary, the 1970s water mains had reached the end of life and causing recent service disruptions, making timely replacement essential. This plan invests $4.8 million in water mains and $3.8 million in roads, improving reliability and protecting public health. The funding also includes a $600,000 loan from surplus lands to be repaid over 5 years, starting in year 6 under the next water wastewater bylaw update. So that's just a quick update. This is the map that was brought forward by Public Works. It's also included as attachment in the report as well, showing the different areas highlighted by color and designated by year. So that's there as well. We could talk through that. Again, we always like to bring up the strategic plan so that we can show that we are advancing the priorities that are advanced in there that Council has approved, and that we are supporting financial sustainability and community vitality by funding programs and initiatives. So this is the end of the report. bit quicker than a full detailed report and just available there if you have any questions.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ms. Pope, and thanks staff for the extra work and the additions and some of the presentation materials. I'm sure they'll be more appreciated when we do the public meeting, as you mentioned, so thanks for that. Do you want is there discussions you'd like specifically about the report or sorry, the presentation? Because I know we're going to do a more fulsome conversation about the report. But are you looking for feedback about the report or sorry, the presentation? I'll get this right one time. About how would you like us to manage that? Because I think there's a lot of keenness to get going on the budget conversations, but what specific, are you looking for specific feedback on the presentation or otherwise?
I definitely welcome feedback on the presentation if there's any concerns or I haven't addressed something. Just in you speaking in the moment, I just wanted to highlight, there was one question at the last meeting that's not written here as far as a formal response, but we did reach out to our consultants, Watson Associates, about development charges and the availability of those funds to be able to fund an internal loan on projects, future projects or what have you. And it's definitely eligible under DCs and we can move forward with that, which is really great. And as a reminder, we had used the Bank of Canada rate for the other DCs that we were doing the internal borrowing for at 3.25%. So although that's not written in the port, we have reached out and we do have that data back as well, but I believe all the other items are included. So if there's any comments about the report, but if not, then I'm glad to move forward with any questions about the budget in general.
So just for clarity, the two instances that we were talking about as we discussed at the last meeting were the internal loan for the groundworks at the new downtown park and at the CMCC. So Ms. Pope, like I said, reached out and both of those amounts are eligible for DC funding. So we'll, as directed at the last meeting, those will be funded in the same sort of debenture process using the Bank of Canada interest rate like we have done in the past because they're eligible and they shouldn't be paid for by the levy because they're eligible for DC funding. Any questions about the presentation? Councillor Byrne.
Through the chair to Kimberly, if I understood the presentation right, there hasn't been any changes to impact as far as the dating. So they did it in 2012, were updated to 2016. There was no increase for 2025 of 2.4%.
So the CVA or the current value assessments that MPAC does, they're still at the 2016 and the province hasn't indicated the next phase in period and when that's going to start. So the actual role for the municipality remains the same. The only time you'll see a change is if someone has torn down a structure, built a structure, made a significant addition. Of course, their properties are changing, but that's more independent because of circumstance, not because of general assessment.
So the 2.4, I think that I won't speak for Councilor Byrne, but with regards to the 2.4% increase that we have received, that's predominantly due to growth, like new residences on the tax roll. That's not like the CVA hasn't grown. Yeah, it's just additional properties now paying taxes. Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Other questions about the presentation, Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair back to Kimberly, could you explain for me the 1% on the revenues for the police stuff? Whatever that's about $17,000, that 1% works out to. Where's that coming from? I always get asked from people, they figure we're getting a cut on the speeding tickets they're writing all over the township, and I just like to be able to tell them the actual answer.
Yeah, the 1%, as Ms. Pope's going to just clarify, is with regards to the transfer. There's a transfer of prisoners that there's a fee for or rebate for, and that's literally our share of it. It's a divvied up between anyone. I'm sure Selwyn receives a fraction of it as well because there's one ward at Selwyn that has Peterborough versus OPP. So that's divided up amongst whoever is providing their police service to. They get the revenue in and then they allocate it based on I don't know how they calculate it, but that's our share of the calculation for the revenues. But Ms. Pope.
That's exactly right. And so depending on what they've done in the year, the costs that they've incurred, the funds that come into them, and then any profit share that they need to share back to the municipalities that have contracts with them. So we don't know until they've finished their year and they've reconciled, and then we get a amount of funding. Just to put it into perspective, 2025, the funding that we've received, that we've recorded so far is just under 24,000 for 2025.
Other questions with regards to the presentation? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Pope, and we will continue moving forward. First, I need a mover and a seconder to receive the second draft presentation, moved by Councillor Natchoff, seconded by Councillor Byrne. All in favor? That is approved. On to the report, Ms. Pope.
Thank you. Most of the actual report is contained within the slides. So I just want to highlight the area where we, on page 2, where we list the various changes and what's happened, just to make sure that you understand what has changed between the two presentations. Just give me 1 second. So when the motions came forward and we were reviewing the motions, a couple of them are included here. So the sale of Larmer Line, we've been able to take the proceeds of 148,000, and then again, the One Union Street sale of 195,000. And if you look at your capital budget, you'll see under asset replacement, the $3.2 million still being presented there at 100% of the depreciation value. But you'll notice that it's 343,000, I believe it is. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Is that correct? 343,000, which is reduced off of what we're requiring from the tax rate to fund that full 100% depreciation, because we've applied those two projects according to the motions. So I wanted to clarify that. The events under the CAO were reduced by 5,000. Kawartha Conservation Authority had an increase in their final budget that they provided us. So it's only $501, but it's there. We discussed Mr. Hack in the original presentation had not included the full operating request they had in their motion at that time. So we corrected that. That's the 1,500. And then the various changes in the library DC. So that reduced the impact on their levy request from us. So there was $13,145 that we didn't have to fund through the municipal tax rate. There was a reduction in their operating and their capital levies. So those are both there. Millbrook Valley Trail Master Plan, 25,000, that was removed out of the budget as per the motion. $10,000 transfer to reserves for the MVT Master Plan. And then we had 149,000 for new capital proposal for the downtown parks land detail design. And including tax, that was 151,600. So that was adjusted because I believe it was the pre-tax amounts on the first draft. And then we received an updated proposal with the municipal HST on the CMCC lands detailed design and construction, including tax. So that went to 146,700 as well. And then we also received an updated quote with the municipal HST for the Maple Leaf Park lighting with a total cost of 66,700, which council had approved to be funded. The original 50,000 to be funded through the Parkland in lieu reserve. So what we did was we increased, instead of it being 50,000, we've matched it. So it was 50,000 in the first report, we matched it. That's what council asked us to use from the reserve. So when we got the updated quote, we again matched it, and that's what you're seeing in this budget. So other than that, those are the primary areas that weren't discussed in the presentation, and happy to take any questions.
Chris, do you maybe just want to speak to that, the adjustment, seeing as it's your department with regards to that project and the lighting, and sort of just explaining sort of where we're at now that we have the formal quote?
Through you, Mayor, to council, with the ball field lighting equipment. Yeah. So we did get a quote in. We have 6 lighting poles on the ball fields out there. We have 4 of them that have a really good lean. We got 2 that are leaning. So the quote is to straighten the poles and replace the lighting with 28 updated LED fixtures.
So the 66,000, just to clarify, is fixing them all instead of just fixing 4 of the 6. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay. All right. Thanks for that initial discussion, Kimberly. And now it's over to council for conversations and questions. Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair to that last mention, they're replacing these steel poles with different poles. Is there some reclaim on some of that, or not just going to do the lighting?
Yeah, so as we discussed, so the quote is to just sort of reset the existing poles, not replace them. That would be in the realm of 300,000 plus to do. So this is just correcting them and refurbishing the lighting, the bulbs and things like that that need replacement. So we're optimistic that Chris has talked to other reps in other parks that have done this sort of thing, and rather than a full replacement at the hundreds of thousands of dollars, we're gonna try this first and see if it's, gets us enough bang for the buck. Other questions? Deputy Mayor?
Through you, Chair, maybe you can help me, find, I'm looking for the water main reconstruction project. I can see the 3.8 in the water and wastewater side, but and I only see like 2.8 in the future budgets on the public works side. I'm just wondering where the rest of it's sitting. I think it was 4.8 on the public works, am I correct? Like, I don't see a distinct line for that. Unless it's the road reconstruction one, but it doesn't seem to get you all the way there. I'm just kind of curious where the chunks of it are.
Through Mr. Mayor to the deputy mayor, just in the capital program, we've identified you have road reconstruction projects as a third line item. And you have hot mix also in there as part of that item, which again is 5 years. So that's making up your road restoration. And we also had included a part of the design fees, which was the consultant fee and sidewalk replacements also in there. So those three programs, those three line items in the program are to identify that program, and your current year is identified in black there. Or in, so does that answer the question?
Through you, Chair. I think so. So it's with the hot mix, the road reconstruction, and then obviously the design work is there too. But there's other works in those numbers as well for the black numbers. There's, other projects that are ongoing this year. Okay, so that's why it's more than the. Okay, gotcha. So it's buried in those numbers. It's not distinct. Got it. Thank you.
Other questions, members of council? Oh, just for clarity, Ms. Pope, just so I think council might be already aware, but just for the sake of it. So that's the 343 for the property use sales is in that. If you go to the capital lines with regards to the ARR, that's where that is showing up in the capital budget. If you can just go, I think it's the 1 or 2 pages earlier than that. One more. And now go up. One more. Correct. So under the fine, so that's the 343 in red that we see with regards to the asset replacements. Okay. Oh, and as council might also recall, just as in the current discussion, so we only included the 2 properties. There was a third in discussion because we haven't finalized any agreements there. So until we have a signed agreement on a purchase, it doesn't really make sense to pre-allocate or predetermine the utilization of monies. We were hopeful and optimistic, but we'll see what happens as the staff continue to work on that, the additional sale of property, and that's something that can be considered future. Other questions with regards to any elements of the budget? The floor is open. I'll go back to one of mine. So Ms. Pope, just for clarity as well. So we're at 4.82%. If my math is accurate, and I always go to you before I would ever assume that, from an ARR standpoint, at 4.28, or sorry, 4.82, we're utilizing 100% the full $3.2 million towards the asset replacement, which is fantastic, but it's not something we traditionally fund at 100%. So if council wanted to make further reductions on the levy outside of capital projects, that is an opportunity that we utilize. We usually wait until this sort of motion so we understand, or this meeting so that we understand there's fewer potential changes or overruns or things like that that might come in, seeing as we're up to November instead of September now. So by my math, it's about 3.7% of an ARR reduction is equivalent to 1% of the tax levy. So for everyone, if you want to withdraw any percent of the ARR, it's for every 3.7, you go from 100%, it equals 1% on the levy. So for instance, if you wanted to go from 4.82% to 3.82%, it would be approximately 96.3% of the ARR instead of the 100%. Just so people are aware, because I think, we've been over a lot of the capital budget already, and we've had the benefit of a few strategic purchases and a few more to come that staff are working on. So it's, usually those monies would go to the asset replacement reserve anyway, so we're by pre-directing them, we're, you know, we're well ahead of where we traditionally would get to at this point. So I think it's definitely, we usually reserve that conversation to the end, but if there's no other questions, then we can have that conversation now, but I defer to council on that. Just wanted to put it in perspective. Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair, just so I'm assured what we're talking about by the end. Because I thought we're looking for public input this afternoon, that's pushed off till next week. Is that not supposed to be encapsulated before we do too much more on that discussion that you were talking about? Because we've never funded the asset management to 100%, as far as I know. So.
Yeah, the public usually doesn't make many comments about asset replacement. So I'm just suggesting that for public consideration, the most of the budget percent wise isn't going to change or fluctuate much if there's not a lot more feedback or discussion with regards to the budget. So what we could be doing is having a conversation, and if we get through any other questions that exist, you know, to be fruitful, it's kind of the, where does council want the percentage to go? And so, you know, it doesn't mean that there couldn't be anything can be reconsidered at that public meeting, but traditionally it's more requests or information about existing projects or this, that, and the other thing. But the asset replacement is really up to us to utilize, because there's not many other things unless there's discussions about other capital projects we want to remove. But the ARR conversation can be after that or before it. It really doesn't matter. But I think it's important for the public meeting to understand where we're at with council's work versus before we, you know, it's kind of a fruitless meeting if we don't, you know, utilize it to make some additional changes. And I'm not comfortable with 4.82%. So if any residents are, maybe they would like it lower. I'm not sure, but that is our opportunity to discuss. So we're not approving the final budget. The budget doesn't get approved. We're just giving direction as to what percent we would like it to be at. And unless there's other areas that we foresee or projects to cut, usually using 1% of the ARR to get to 3.82% is, you know, it's not an approved done yet. It's just where we're thinking of going for that future public meeting. Does that make sense? Cool. Question, Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair, just so the feedback I've got, yes, 4 or 5% increase in property taxes is not something that the average public is looking forward to, especially when we're looking at a whole lot of downloading from the federal government with the state of the economy the way it is. I'd like to see it lower.
And that's what we're here to discuss, is how to get it lower. So open to any questions with regards to staff. Are all here for questions about their department. So the floor is open. I understood that there were some questions that maybe didn't get answered last time. So I want to make sure I'm being very clear that this is the time to answer those questions. Councilor Nacho.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you very much for the presentation. Once again, excellent job. Can you give me just a reminder of where we've come in the last 3 budgets? I know that it's always been under 4. I think typically it's going to be like 3.3 to 3.7 over the last 3 years. And then that being the case as well, then if you could tell me, I know that lopping off to get to 3.82, if you could tell me what the asset reserve would be if we got to 3.5% increase. Thank you.
Yeah, so just to clarify again, so at so the past few years, as you said, is 3%, 3.37%, 3.4%, and then this year is the final maker. So by my calculation, if you do for every percent, you're pretty much taking 100,224 off the ARR. So if you did 1%, you're down from 3.2 to 3.08 ballpark, just very, very high level estimating. But then again, for a further percent, you could take another one, and then for every 1% is 124 off, but it's just in the 3.7 is the equivalent. So if you took 2% off, you're in the sort of that 93, 94-ish range. So that's just to put it in perspective. So I think if I'm not, Ms. Book, do you remember offhand what percentage from the we've put away over the, like, we have the tax increases for those years? Do you have, like, even last year, what percent of the ARR we were able to get to?
So last year we ended up at 92%. We put away $2,724,289.
And it's important to remember that because this is asset replacement is based on the previous year, it fluctuates, right? Like, because even at 92% last year, we would be further ahead with 92% this year, money wise, just not percentage wise. So it depends on your depreciation of your assets. And because we've refurbished and rebuilt a significant amount of assets, we're starting to see that depreciation escalate, right? When you get those, nothing depreciates faster than something new. So we are experiencing that, and that's why the number's going up in that regard as well, in case anyone's interested. But good question. Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair, I'd just like to highlight, so we sold a couple of pieces of property. We have another potential one coming up at some point in time. They're one-offs. The township, the taxpayers actually own that property for decades on some of it. And you can only sell it once. So I'd like to get a gist of just spending within our means. Like, we always seem to be asking for more every time. And doesn't seem acceptable to most people, that we just keep wanting more, spending wherever. But at the end of the day, these couple of reductions, they're not going to happen again. At some point in time, maybe the Tinney property downtown will get utilized. I don't even know where that's at. That's still on report. So I just want to highlight that fact that we're just seem to be living beyond our means.
Well, I think there's a number of factors to that as well. I mean, traditionally, before 2020, I guess, property values escalate. So you didn't need to raise the levy percentage to accumulate the value of that growth. But if you're holding a 2016 value, the only thing you can do is raise tax rate, right? If you're frozen at 2026 values, you're not getting the benefit of the housing increase in value on the CVAs. You're stuck at 2016. So all of the pressure on the municipal tax rate has to come from increasing the rates on the 2016 values. So what you're seeing around the province is they like to say at the provincial government level that it's a nil-sum game. It doesn't matter. It doesn't change. You need to raise what you need to raise. But the reality is tax rates are exponentially increasing because they're not having the buffering or benefit. If you can raise taxes by 0 if your CVA goes up 4%. And your CVAs have gone up by a lot more than 4% in the last 16 years. So like there's a lot that's putting undue pressure on the tax rate. So you're having to increase taxes exponentially more because you don't have CVAs being updated on a 4-year cycle, and you have it now for 2 cycles. And so we're still waiting. And that's kind of, I think, the misnomer that people don't understand is, yeah, I think it's great that my taxes are staying low because my property, the value of my property in the CVA isn't going up. But your tax rate's going to have to go up because you don't have the incremental gains from the value increasing. And so you would see much lower tax rates if the CVA rates were going up. But that's where we've been left by the province to eat with regards to the downloads from them. Like, there's a rock and a hard place. So I don't think we could say that we're spending beyond our means. I haven't heard anyone asking for less services or less of anything with regards to, in fact, it's quite the opposite. People want more things, and the only place we can go to get them, because we don't have a deficit, is provincial grants, provincial subsidies, and the levy. Ms. Pope?
I just wanted to speak to the part about the properties that have recently sold and the funds. And you made a statement that these are one-offs and that we wouldn't have them in the future, which is correct. But in a little way, it's a tiny bit misleading. And the reason why I want to say this is we are applying those funds against the asset replacement reserve. We're putting those funds away to make a decision in the future for our needs for this municipality. We're not spending those dollars today. So we're not offsetting our budget. And when we talk about asset replacement, every municipality back in 2009, that was the first year they started to record it on the books. Councils weren't even aware of how much money they needed to pay for the capital of their actual assets that they were using in that fiscal year. We're fortunate to be in the position we're in. I will always bring forward 100% of the depreciation level, but I also understand that that's potentially not achievable, if I can say it that way. But it's only taking a look at what did we use in the current year, and I just want to replace that and put those funds away. It doesn't include indexing for the year in which we go to purchase it. It doesn't include all the assets that have dropped off because we fully paid for them and they're fully depreciated. They're still sitting there. We're not depreciating them every year. So it was only a benchmark target that I put in place to say, okay, council, if you really want to put aside money for what you used physically that you can't see financially on paper, this is what you've used. So let's try to reach some semblance of, greater than X amount of, like, percentage wise. So I'm always going to bring you 100% of that at the first draft. It is always a discussion of council and you make your choice. It's similar to a home budget. If your expenses exceeded, you can't put away as much savings as you know you need to, but you can't do it that year. So that's what basically is happening with the asset replacement reserve. But know that when you do take funds from there and you don't put them aside, they cannot grow. And in the future, when you do replace that asset, you don't have as much money from your savings to put towards it. So there is a cost factor when you do cut from the asset replacement reserve, but I'm not saying that you can't or it's not fiscally responsible to do so. You can, just don't completely take it away.
Yeah, and in addition, if you look at the budget, I'm just trying to do the math quickly, but the total budget, it's almost equivalent. We're almost putting away as much as we're spending. So it's not a fair, I don't think it's a fair statement to say just we're spending beyond when you're raising more to put away for the future than you are spending this year. So I understand that it feels like, other municipalities, I think you're going to see an average of about 5 to 6% across the board of the municipalities in Ontario this year, because again, CVA is being frozen, but also costs are exponentially going up. And like I said, we didn't have to make the decision of council to expedite the work on the water mains, et cetera, and all those projects. But every year that continues, and we've got it down from 10 to 5, is just more risk of having more breaks. So that was the decision that council made, and that's increasing that's a portion that's increasing the levy. I don't think that's beyond our means. I think that's replacing the infrastructure that's lived its life, that it's starting to break down twice in 24 hours is enough of an indication for me. But again, I think, and I use this as well as a perspective, I believe, and I'll have to do the math a bit more, but from an asset replacement and a putting away for future costs, expenses, I believe we're close, if not more than the county of Peterborough is putting away from a total million standpoint. So that is a much different scale of budget. So in actual fact, we're saving more than we're spending, which is, I think, the right thing to do. But again, where I always struggle is how much saving is too much saving, because you've got to be reasonable. And like where 100% is great. And I like making incremental gains on the asset replacement. I don't like taking a big drop year, which is obviously tempting, especially in election years. If people are, anxious about running again, they want a good story to tell, but it's not necessarily the right thing to do. So, where we've had multiple consultants tell us that we're far above average, closer to the higher end of people that have put away asset replacement. Unfortunately, I think the province initially insinuated that there was going to be incentives for that sort of frugal fiscal responsibility, but we haven't really seen those yet, other than the bare baseline that you need to have a certain established program in order to qualify for certain grants. Not exactly a big fiscal incentive for making hard decisions about raising taxes to put away monies for assets. But we can also see with the capital budget that there's millions of dollars. I think it's over $3 million this year that is being pulled from reserves and lessening the levy of the things that we're doing because you've been frugal and fiscally responsible by saving monies towards the future. So like I said, it's a debate of how comfortable you want to be and how much I wish there was a better incentive. And we've had those conversations with different people at the province about, this is hard work, and it's really hard work during a pandemic, during all of the ice storms and things like that we're, fighting tooth and nail to get recompensated for things that are far above and beyond the normal municipal course of business. And we haven't always threaded that needle, unfortunately. So, at the end of the day, it's a hard decision, but I don't think it's a fair statement to say we're spending beyond our means when we're saving almost more than we're spending in a lot of comparables. Ms. Pope?
And just because we're on my favorite subject of asset replacement, I just wanted to reiterate. So just even looking at our reserves, over $20 million for asset replacement reserve is sitting there. But over 5 million of that is our deficit in DCs because of the work that we're doing. So we're using a quarter of those asset replacement reserves internally to fund the development charges to begin with. And then we had the report from March of last year where we were funding the 2 programs through the asset replacement reserve for the Parks and Public Works Depot, Parks Works Operations, and the fire station. And that's $10 million between the 2, right? So you have another 10 being pulled from the asset replacement reserve. That's internal funding, and we're able to go back for the development charge portion at 3.25% and make money on it for the municipal taxpayer. The other portions that are internal borrowing, we're just using our 1.9% internal factor for the CPI index. But either way, none of that is possible if you didn't have an asset replacement reserve. So granted, we can't all have everything that we feel we need, and we have to make these hard decisions at the very end. But the reason why you've been able to make some of the decisions you've made to date is because the asset replacement reserve was there for you to make that decision. And if it hadn't been, you couldn't have, and we'd have to go external. And that would have definitely changed our ARL. So it is a bit of a balancing act. So I'm not against cutting it. I will always at the forefront put the pressure on to try to get as much in there as possible. I'm trying to be fiscally responsible for this municipality, but by council making a reduction, you are not being fiscal responsible. You are doing the right thing. And you just have to look at the times. It's like in a family budget. You have to make those hard decisions at the tail end because you can't have it all. So.
And instead of paying 3.2 or whatever, market rate of interest to do loans and keep it external, we're actually, exponentially ahead by earning interest back from the DCs on those loans as well. So it's a good news story, and it's a luxury to be able to do. And I want to give previous councils a lot of hard work, because when you see that working that $3 million out of the initial budget that is no longer coming in, it's less than 300,000 now, as you can see, and that's been the case for quite some time. That money doesn't get replaced without the levy. And that's where you had years of 5% and 10% increases, because the money's gone, and it is gone. So it's not coming from anywhere else, and the province isn't making us whole. So we're happy to it's a good news though story, as well, as you mentioned, to maintain that funding and fully pay off that CMCC loan, which will be done in the next few years, which is excellent. And then we'll be able to rededicate the future funds of whatever's left towards more capital projects and things like that. So that's a really good news story. Questions with regards to the budget, Councillor Brink?
Through the chair, to follow up on that discussion, I think I have a reasonably good understanding of the correlation between the tax levy and the assessed values that impact comes out with. At the end of the day, the reality is, even if the levy stays small and the percentage of your house value goes way up, the individual taxpayer is more out of his pocket. It's easy to slough it off as saying, oh, we at 0%, but you're still, the increase in the tax levy, the market value is going to cost you more out of pocket. And that's what I'm trying to speak for.
Yes, but again, you're having to raise the levy more in the absence of that. We don't have controls over your CVA. That's the provincial groundwork that's setting it. That's the table we have to sit at. And the fact that they've decided to leave the chairs as they are for as long as they have has a negative impact in making tax rates go higher than they would otherwise have to. So it's not even fair to compare any tax rates or tax rate increases in previous years because of that variability in the actual CVAs. But fair point. Other questions with regards to the budget? Not seeing a lot of hands. Councillor Natchoff.
Thank you, through your chair. I guess I'll be the one to put it out there that just looking at the aggregate number of over the last 3 years, the percentage increase works out to be roughly 3.25%. So I would be comfortable having run my platform running was always to be under 4%. So I would ideally like to see something in that 3.25% increase raise. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. So I guess maybe what we could do is, rather than give specific direction, is we can talk about with regards to the ARR, maybe for that. Well, I guess we should really have those conversations now, because the final budget meeting is really the final budget meeting, and you could decide between those percentages after the public meeting. But maybe, Ms. Pope, it would make sense to, if we can, I don't know about posting, so I don't want to disrupt that component, but it would be great if we could have maybe the AR with what a reduction in ARR would equivalent. I can say it, but it's a different thing to see it. And maybe if there could be a brief summary, like you have about the levy in the capital budgets past, right? Like you have, if you want to get to 6%, you got to reduce it by, this is how much 100,000 that equates to. But maybe just so we have a really clear understanding for after that public meeting, when council has their final discussion, we can have is that possible to have a little breakdown of what the difference would be?
Absolutely, that's possible. I think because this has been reported, and we're in a unique situation where we have this 1 week gap in between the evening reporting, because that's already been posted, and that's what we're going to discuss next Thursday. But if you give me some information today, I can definitely have an add-on that you can approve to receive next week, that we could have that dialogue and that discussion. So if you're looking at something, give me this week to have the opportunity to do some calculations, and that would be great. I could definitely put that together.
So that's like, again, we're leaving that conversation for that time. So that's great. Counselor Edwards.
Sure, now we got things going. I agree with our counselor here, that I think we should be back down around 3.2 would be high enough.
Thanks, Counselor. Any other questions? Deputy Mayor?
Through you, Chair, I think maybe to provide a little bit more direction for Kimberly, like I think bring back a chart to kind of show if we want to be at 3%, it would be this. If it was 3.25, it would be this. If it was 3.5, this, 3.75, that, 4x, right? Like kind of have that chart breakdown. I think that would be the clarity that we're looking for. So we can kind of, we know that nuance in between. That makes sense.
Yeah, so maybe because we're at 4.8, so maybe having it at like 4, 3.5, 3, 2.5, kind of that sort of range. And then that, rather than having all these other numbers, just have a few basic ones where we're talking about a threshold. But yeah, that would be my suggestion. If you want to go to 2, that's fine as well, just so perspective wise. Okay, sounds good. Everyone understands what that'll be. Any other questions with regards to any other projects or any other questions with regards to the budget? If not, this is the end of the meeting. Councilor Natchoff, if you want to just ask for a point of clarity, go ahead.
So not knowing that our meeting today was going to be moved to next week, I'm going to be on vacation next week. So I will not be available to vote. Like, I will obviously try to remotely connect, but the fact that I'm like going to be an island in the middle of the Atlantic and that may not be able to happen. What would happen now then? Would I put in something on record saying that I'm in support of a vote at this percentage, or I'm just not included in the vote if I'm not able to connect? I just wanted some clarity how that would work.
Well, that will be a question for our clerk, Ms. Page.
Through Mayor Graham to yourself, Councillor Natchoff, would you like to participate remotely? So in theory, we should be able to do that. So why don't we do a test? And if there's something you would like on the record today, I think make it just in case something happens, or please feel free to send something like written, and then we can read something aloud. That's what I recommend.
Yeah, and we have you on the record with your below 4% or 3.2% in that realm. And so what I will definitely keep that on top of mind. And if we're not able to, or if we have any tech issues along the way. So I apologize, I wasn't aware of that. Other questions with regards to the budget? Seeing none. So with regards to the motion, Ms. Page, how would you like to encapsulate moving forward for the next meeting so that Ms. Pope has what she needs?
Through Mayor Graham to Ms. Pope, would we just like a motion to say that you council request staff to bring back a range between 2% to the 4.8%, reducing it from the ARR?
Okay, can I get a mover and a seconder for that motion? Is that okay? Ms. Pope, do you want to speak to that before I vote? Sorry.
Just verbally, before you had mentioned between 2.5 and the 4.8, did you want to go down to 2? 2? Okay, that's fine.
Okay, so she's got that number correct in the motion, so we don't have to worry about that. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that motion? Moved by Councilor Natchoff, second by Councilor Byrne. All in favor? That is approved. So then do we need a motion to receive the report as well separately, I'm assuming? No, that's it? Excellent. Perfect. Yeah, and apologies for the disruption with regards to the rescheduling, but I think with the weather, it merited it. Confirming bylaw, that bylaw number 2026-01 being a bylaw to confirm the proceeding of the special meeting held January 15th, 2026 at 1 p.m. be read a first, second, third time and passed this 15th day of January, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and the corporate seal attached thereto, moved by Councilor Edgerton and Councilor Natchoff. All in favor? That is approved. Lastly, motion for adjourning today's meeting. Moved by Councilor Natchoff, second by Deputy Mayor Huntley. All in favor? That is approved. So just a reminder as we've adjourned the meeting, just apologies with regards to rescheduling. I hope not too many people show up tonight, but we've updated the signage around the community and also have been sending out PSAs. But just for confirmation, the public special budget meeting has been rescheduled for next Thursday, January 22nd at 5 p.m. in the council chamber. So we'll hopefully see you then, and hopefully in better weather. Take care.